Hey everybody, our guest today is Eric Egnet, and he's a person that has started and sold about 3 different companies, and he's actually in the process of starting a new one. I wanted to have him on because I thought it'd be helpful for us to get to know somebody that has been successful in starting and selling quite a few different companies. In our interview, we get into the mindset behind an entrepreneur and what it really takes to be able to achieve some of the things that he's been able to achieve. We talk a little bit about his childhood and his upbringing and what things around him have allowed him to achieve some of the things that he's done up until this point. And we get into a crucial question in our interview, and that is the question why. And why asking why is so important, and why we don't all ask that question and the fears behind that. It was a lot of fun. It was a great interview, so let's get to it. So Eric, how you doing, man? How you been?
Hey Manny, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm good.
Doing
Last time we
well.
saw each other was has it been like 2 years maybe?
I think so.
2 years or
Certainly in
so.
that neck of the woods.
So I know that you're super famous, but for those that don't know who Eric is, do you mind giving us like a 2, 3 sentence kind of, what you're up to these days?
Yeah, I'm gonna, I would qualify your super famous thing. I'm just a passionate guy who loves, exploring new endeavors and whatnot. So I've started a new company in the last many months in the midst of a world where I think there's opportunity. A lot of companies changing and transitioning and transforming, and I think there's opportunity out in that marketplace. So having done a lot of work for companies over the years, I think there is and I actually genuinely care. I want to see people and businesses thrive, not just survive. And so that's it's a new business, and where I apply some modern age technologies and some modern strategy approaches to help these companies help themselves. So that's it in a nutshell.
And so I think I caught you at a good time. I'm sure we'll get some good stories around that.
Sure.
But before we get into all the nitty gritty, can you take us back to who Eric was as a kid, kind of like growing up? Were you the same goal-driven, fearless guy that you are today, or did things change?
No, I don't think so. I think, I grew up with a humble, family. My father was a home painter, a house painter. And so it was, a time when, and my mother was like a crossing guard. So it was, things were always kind of, we always did well, but it was tight. And I always looked at, I don't know if I want to, follow the same kind of trajectory of learning a trade like that, but maybe perhaps I could find myself in to some new areas. And I think when as a kid, I was very much into science, and I always thought I might be doing something with science specifically. And my mom bought me a chemistry set, I can remember, and doing all kinds of fun experiments. And I used to be into model rockets,
Oh,
so launching
really?
model rockets and building rockets. So I always thought that was a trajectory I was going to go to. And I think I was always, curious. And and I think that for me, the world's an oyster, that
Hmm.
expression. It's what we make of it. I remember, and I still think about it. When you wake up as a kid, you have the whole day ahead of you, right? Like, what could happen?
Right.
We're alive. Like, you don't have a care in the world, but you have like, what could this day bring? And I think I still have some of that, maybe not the same energy,
Yeah.
but I still look at what are the possibilities that are out there. So I think I had those early ingredients in my making. And then, got into school, and, we can talk about that a little bit as well.
That's an interest. I have a question for you around that, because just based on the school that you went to, but if I always hear, and again, it depends on who you talk to, that to an extent, school can be a little restrictive. They have curriculums and things that they want the kids to focus on. So you being the curious kid that you were, Did that ever bother you, or did the school that you were a part of more encourage that type of thinking and curiosity that you had?
No, I think it was the former. I think I felt like I was just another in a process of curricula that's been designed for the masses. And I actually, and I'm not negative about school at all. I think that getting a good education or getting exposed to things and areas and subjects that have not been necessarily, taught or, given enough kind of education around is always a good thing. This, I would call general education is a good thing. But I also think you need to
Could you
be
classify that a
worldwide.
little bit?
Well, I think general education in terms of mathematics, right?
Okay.
Being able to write and learning more about our history, learning more about kind of, how one science, right? How to, learning some of the things about science, even some things around kind of, crafts like in schools and things like that. I think creativity is really, really important. I'll say this about school, though, right? The school, and certainly when I was going to school and growing up, and I still think it's the case. You're growing up. You're as an individual, and then you're almost being channeled down a pathway that says you ultimately have to make a decision on what you want to do with your life.
Right.
And I think all roads are trying to get to that place, and there's pressures in school, teachers, your family, and everybody I think means well, but they ultimately get you to a place where that you're forced and you're wrestling, and almost you get anxious about what is it that I want to choose, and then ultimately I need to choose, and then I'm gonna, somewhere mentally in my mind I'm gonna stay. That's what I'm going to do in the rest of my life, and then we're going to grow up, and I'm going to get that job, and I'm going to get a picket fence around my house, and I'm going to buy a car, and I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to go on with life, and then I'm going to get older, I'm going to retire, and rocking a chair. And I've always said, no, I don't really subscribe to that model. I think that we are as individuals, we have many gifts. I think most of us may not think so, but we have many gifts that we can use in our repertoire to become people that, we get excited about in terms of the things that we do, things that we like. So I think school is foundational in some respect. I don't think the school that I did allowed me to, I grew up in Methuen, and so I went to the Methuen school systems and all of that. I don't think there was exceptional, caveats and calling people out and seeing their potential and whatnot, except when I went to high school. And if you want me to go into that, Manny, right now, I can tell you that as well. Would that be helpful?
So I think one interesting point that you mentioned was kind of like the crafts and kind of like the extracurricular, quote unquote, that you mentioned. I was talking to my wife not too long ago, and those seem to just be going down the wayside. It just seems like more and more we're just getting rid of all these more creative kind of classes that you and I, fortunately had. I mean, I've been able to, I draw and I do my other stuff on the side, but I don't think that I don't know if I didn't have that exposure in school, I don't know if I would be doing that. I think
that's right. And if you factor that into like even musical instruments, I can remember playing trumpet. I was playing trumpet, not that, I'm a trumpet player now, but it was good to get that exposure.
Yeah.
It was good to look at the world through different lenses. And that's, I teach that like throughout my career now, the lens you look through and the variety of lenses you have are really, really important. Because if you only have one lens and the only thing you've been exposed to is, the subjects that you've been, offered up to, and you have to pick one of them, there's no originality necessarily in that, right? And there's no exposure. So, but I think that, I also did, I remember, early on I ran in track. So I,
nice.
The track, there was some crafts, there was cooking class, little cooking thing, trumpet, those were all, but they all like the little recorder back in the days, all of those things, those seem like, they're like electives and they're, you add that to the mix, but I actually really think those are really, really important because, it's the separation from what you do and who you are, right? It's what you do and who you are. So I think those, getting that creative bent, and it's not necessarily that, only limited to those, but
Hmm.
it's really, really important. And
Well,
I
it's
think
kind of,
that, sure, I think what you see a lot of schools and all that is they defund that stuff. That's not like really, it costs more money to kind of carry that on, and they
right.
leave it up to the parents and the families to try to, get their kids into sports and get them into things. But, society has an interesting pull on, affordability for a lot of that stuff and a lot of other things that, children will not necessarily kind of gravitate to unless they have parents that will kind of, try to nudge them into it. And there's a difference between, doing what your parents want you to do and what
And
you want to do as well.
oh
Let's make
yeah.
sure we're clear on that. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting though, because I feel like even more and more now, I mean, you're seeing so many people that are able to make a career and make a living just out of the things that they're passionate about, that people just want to learn more from.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it almost seems like the school system is going one way, but society and what's valuable and what we trade for, for money essentially is shifting, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
I think, well, listen, I think the world's on that note. I think we're moving from a time where you go, and it certainly was the generation before me. So I'm 54 for the full disclosure. But the generation before me, people stayed in their jobs for 35 years, 40 years, 50
Hmm.
years. They retired, they had their pension. They look forward, now they're rocking in their chair, or yeah, they were, and they have their check, comes in the mail.
Yeah.
And they get to tell the tale of all their life of what they did working in whatever they did. But I can tell you, here's one interesting point, Manny, and going back to my childhood, I tell this story a lot because it's true. Even when I was a kid, but especially as I became a teenager, I'd be with my friends, we'd be playing the ballpark or whatever, right? And I would see an older person sitting on a bench. And I always ran up to the bench and said, hello, how you doing? For two reasons. One, it's oftentimes these people are alone by themselves. They're, and nobody engages with them. And so I always wanted to make sure I did my part to say hello.
Mhm.
And number two, I said, listen, I'm a young man growing up. I'm coming up in the world, and I'm trying to learn now lessons that I can apply throughout my life rather than learn them later, so that I look back. And so if I could ask you some questions, that would be wonderful. So I said, what did you have? What did you do your whole life? What would you do for a career? Why did you make that choice? Why did you stay with the same company for as long as you stayed? And I said, if I can ask you one final question, what would you do different? And do you have, and second question, final question, what regrets might you have? And they said, you know what, I would have taken more risk. I wouldn't have taken the easy path of staying with the same company all these years. I regret I had some ideas and I had some skills and I had some abilities that I never actually took advantage of because
Mm.
I should have been, need to be responsible. I need to have a job and I just need to stay in that job, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly go the years. And now I look back and say, I don't feel terrible about what I did, but I wish I had looked at the world differently. And I did that many, many, many times. And I think that helps seed, me into thinking, it's not necessarily a one follow the yellow brick road path.
Right.
That you have to make a path out there and be able to be willing to look at things again through some different lenses and make the choices that go along with that. Yep.
That's kind of interesting. How old were you when you were going out to
Yeah, I was like,
these guys kind of
I
asking?
wasn't eight, but I was
Yeah.
like I was in my early teens,
Yeah.
definitely. I was doing that
That's
stuff.
mature for a teenager to
Yeah,
be
and then when
thinking
I got
about those
into like my
questions.
late teens and early 20s, it was very concentrated in that way. And again, I'm not trying to say I looked at the world differently. Again, my father was a house painter. I mean,
Mm.
we lived in apartments. We didn't live in homes, and so I'm like, I knew I needed to do something to do something because for me to go off and try to achieve things, it was not going to be through my father's paint business. And so
Mm.
I'm like, I want to look at what those options are. I also remember, friends of mine decided to make those decisions. Like, we're going to college, or we're going to go, or I'm going to become an electrician, and I'm going to become a mechanic in a car. And they decided to go down all these paths. So again, that choice when you're in school, you get you're seeing people, they already know what they're going to do. In some cases, father has a business, parents have a business, so you go work in that business. And so I think that, a lot of those things kind of circled in my mind, and I'm a guy who loves to look at variables and come up with equations and try to help me, make decisions that I do.
So it sounds like very early on, you had kind of linked your current situation with you wanting something different.
Yeah, and something more, right? I wanted
saw.
some, and so when you're we'll talk, I'm sure, being entrepreneurial, that there's the risk side of it, but I also think that entrepreneurial creates opportunity. Then it affords opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily see by going traditional channels, applying for a job, staying in the same company, and all of those things. So so I was driven. I had that drive. I also had this drive to be. I knew I wanted to do something, like I said, science related. I didn't understand technology at that point in the time because it wasn't really prevalent. But that changed in high school. Yeah.
So what did happen in high school that changed that?
Thanks for asking, Manny. I was a sophomore in Methuen High School, and I was, I wasn't on the sports side, the jock side, running around. I gave that up after freshman year, though I ran varsity in my freshman year, which was great. I kind of. And then I wasn't on the other side of just like, hoodlums and all the other stuff that goes with it. I think I got along with everybody and everybody well. And I was a little bit of a punk, I'll be honest. It was I was, the classes that I took and that were foundational and important, they were okay. I wouldn't think I was a great student because I wasn't that particularly strongly interested in, doing my very, very, very best in all of those classes. But where I was interested, i.e. chemistry and other science classes, I excelled. But I was walking down the hall one day, and there was a gentleman in the hall I had never met. He was a new teacher, beginning of the year. And he goes, I'm going to be teaching a computer class. And Wayne Computers at the time had donated the first ever computer system to Methuen High School. It was still out of the box. They were putting it together. And he goes, I've worked in the commercial side of, computing, but I've decided I want to teach. And I would love to have, I'm out here hustling in the hall, trying to get two students to sign up. And I remember I was like, I don't even know here, but I walked in the room and I watched the word going across the screen. I'd taken typing classes and all this, but this was actually just happening. And I kept going, it was simple. It said Wayne, right? And I'm like, that's cool. I like that a lot. And so I got into the class, and for me, it was like, I get it. And I'll give the summary version because the longer version is too long. I actually excelled at all the exercises he gave this guy, Joe Austin in Methuen High School. But he gave me other work because he challenged me. And I would stay after school every single day, almost, or 2-3 times a week minimum. And I would work till 5 o'clock on, going through the manuals, writing notes, taking manuals home at night beyond the class, but more on the weighing system. Probably a little devious. I was rebooting the system and all that during the day when I shouldn't have been. And I learned a lot from that. And that was my indoctrination into it. And I wrote a lot of applications, and my mom ended up working for Wang in the latter years, and she had brought some of the stuff that I wrote from high school to the Wang guy, and I got a chance to meet a guy at Wang with software development, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. And I got to Wang for one summer, not programming, but assembling computers and whatnot, but I had a chance to talk to people, and I started saying to myself, maybe not science, maybe technology, maybe not science. So I managed to take more computing classes in high school, and actually, if I'm full disclosure, I was skipping classes to go to more class. in high school. And but though I call those the very early foundational years for me. And I told myself when I was in high school, I want to be a programmer analyst. That was my goal. I want to be a programmer analyst.
So here's a question for you. So you were introduced to computers. Your dad is a painter. How did they take to this new interest of yours? Like, were your parents super supportive and they're like, yeah, follow your dreams. Like, this sounds cool. I don't get it, but you do what you have to do to, to explore this new excitement that you have? Or were they more like, I don't know what this is. Maybe you want to focus your time on something a little bit more quote unquote realistic that will feed your family? Like, how was that dynamic?
Yeah, I think it was a little of each. I think it was unknown. It was like the unknown unknowns, right? The expression known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. Yeah. And I think that, but I think they were always supportive. I think that, they didn't really understand it, but I think they appreciate it. And I ended up getting a job at it was called Computer Town up in Salem, New Hampshire, years back, and it was right at the cusp of when PCs and Macintosh computers were hitting the market. So I spent the summer, it was like an inventory job, helping, with inventory, but they gave me the chance to play with the computers. And then I had an opportunity. They didn't know how to manage the inventory. They had parts and products and all of this, but they didn't have no software for it. So I told them I could write the software. And they were like looking at me like I had three heads. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, let me borrow a PC, which I couldn't afford, by the way. I'll write some software for our group. And then like 2 weeks later, I came in with the software that I wrote after hours in my room, showing my parents, Manny, that, I've done this for the computer, and I brought it in, and that became the new standard for the company. And so, and then I remember it was a summer job, and then there was some, at the end of the summer, they were letting go people, and they even let go my boss. But my boss had said to me, hey, listen, we didn't have a chance to pay you for that application, so I'm going to give you that PC. And I was like, beautiful. That was awesome. So that gave me the chance to play even more and study even more around, that world. So that was really interesting.
What language were you writing in at the time?
It was all basic, and basic doesn't mean basic. It was the basic language. And I was playing with, I went to Northern Essex for a couple of years, and I did like the COBOLs and the Pascals and the Fortrans and all of that. But really basic was it was Wang basic, and then ultimately went through those different languages and whatnot.
So I'll tell you, it makes sense, just hearing your story, it makes sense that you ended up a developer, and so I'm a sysadmin, and I've done a lot of work in PowerShell. It's not necessarily scripting, but you do get to build certain logic to be able to do certain things. Yeah. And I'll tell you, there isn't anything like the feeling of troubleshooting, spending nights trying to figure something, and then having a program that works and automatically does all these things that would take you an hour or two to do.
That's right. So I'll tell you a funny story. So I'll round it up. I took a lot of classes and courses, and I got into boarding. This LC the Cow, Prince Spaghetti, Cracker Jack, Elmer's Glue, LC the Dairy Ice Cream, $7 billion company. And I got in working on, running their those digital back systems. And again, a lot of that, Manny, was the same kind of thing. They had these rich manuals to, step by step what you should take. And it struck me very early on, like, why are we doing it like this? Why is it like, and people took great pride in like, okay, the next step, and they typed it in. And so I started building streams, what they call DCL streams. And I said, listen, these things can run automatically. I don't need them. Let them just execute one by one, and just send me an alert if something goes wrong. Because I don't need to be sitting here babysitting the step. But what ended up happening is the free time that I I started programming in VAX Basic for the company. And so my operations, it was running itself, notifying me if there was a problem while I immersed myself in programming. And then I'm giving you the short story. I got approached a year and a half into it, and they said, Eric, Greg, who was a senior programmer at the time, is leaving. We'd like to make you a programmer analyst. And I was beautiful. That was beautiful. And then I spent the next, 3.5 years there, and I became a senior programmer as well. And I started writing massive systems for 3 of their major divisions in North Andover. So I got a lot of that exposure. It was a lot of fun. And then, man, just like you're saying, like, problem solving, how do you do this? How do you do that? But I would also tell you that, this is going to open the door. The next the section of our conversation is a lot of technology people write technology or write programs and applications because someone gives them a specification, says, go do this. And that's what you should do. And as long as it does it, everybody's happy. They go, great. And then they'll wait for the next specification. But I was always going, why? Why are we doing it? Why are we writing? Why do you need this application, this report, this query? And I started building a relationship with the different, stakeholders in the 3 different divisions. The highest person, in fact, the controllers in those 3 divisions. And they started coming to me often and ask for a meeting because I would add value to what they were trying to do. So then I would improve upon the specification so that ultimately we would start to, we build better software and build better outcomes. And that really paid a lot of dividends because then I got recruited into healthcare after Borden. I had an executive search guy chase me down, and I ended up, here's one. I left a $7 billion Borden who made products and all kinds of stuff all around the globe to a 70-person travel nurse company that I never even heard of, what this concept of travel nursing. It had been started by husband and wife entrepreneurs.
Really?
They created the industry. So I found myself leaving 11, there was, thousands of people aboarded to 70 people in this little place in Malden, Massachusetts. But I went down there. I loved the entrepreneurial thing that they did. They had grown the company to like a $35 million company. They were struggling with what to do next and all of these things. And it gave me a chance to kind of do some new things. So I became systems and programming manager, then IT director. And the IT director started to allow me to do more on the business side as well, in helping look at the business holistically and how we can look end to end all the various functions as well as what we do in the market. Became the CTO, giving the short version. And then in 4 years, we grew the company to like $115 million, brought in angel investors. And then we merged with our largest competitor out of Boca Raton, Florida, called Cross Country Staffing. And they offered me the chief information officer position. And now for 5.5 years, I went back and forth from Boston to Boca, airplane, every other week.
Yeah. Wow.
Every other week, even having young children, to bring these 2 companies together, very different cultures, very different kind of mindsets. And you have to understand that, I think in business to be successful, like technology or business, you have to understand people. You have to understand change and culture and mindsets and all that. And Boca had a very different style than Boston, which had a very different, and we had 2 different cultures. And we also they had very different technology than Boston had. We were doing, all kinds of emerging web technologies, and they were green screen. They were, conservative, really kind of little dated screens. But anyways, we brought it together, bought 2 companies, went public. So I was part of the executive team, the only one out of Boston. The rest of the team was down in Boca. And then we bought 8 more companies. And, it was kind of like a baptism of of technology. I had to bring all these companies under the technology realm. And we grew from when I started at Travcore, we had 600 nurses. When I left Cross Country, we had 6,000 nurses. But what I do in companies, and I still do this very day, is I ask the same questions. Why? So we did one thing at Travcore, like we placed this thing called med-surg nursing. But I'm like, why are we only placing that one specialty? And then I started asking, why aren't we placing ER people in OR and ICU and CCU? And then I started, why aren't we doing physical therapy? Why aren't we doing advanced practice? And not only me, but others were like, we should be doing this. And then we got into doctors, and then we got into executives. And so next thing you know, we created this new company that beyond just placing the travel nursing, we were able to extend our capabilities and add a greater value to our customers. Cross country, to their credit, had cross country university. And then when I was there at cross country, we decided to get into clinical trials too, because you had nurses who go, we want to leave the bedside and we want to get into, we want to still use our skills, but where else can we use them? So we bought a clinical trials company as well. So it was a lot of fun. And I walked into the CEO's office. Here we go, Manny. In 2004, and I said, I'm leaving. And he says, what? And I go, I'm leaving. I've solved the Rubik's Cube. And he goes, but Eric, I had 80 people in my IT department. We had, I had 1,200 internal employees. We had 6,000 people in the field. I'm like, my job's done here. I'm interested in going and solving new challenges rather than just maintaining what we got going on here. And we did some really amazing things, big ERP implementations, multi-million dollars, portals, artificial intelligence, even back in those days. So he goes, well, what is it you're going to do? And I'm going to go launch a media company. He said, what do you know about media? I said, nothing. And he, I don't understand. And I said, Joe, I love you guys. I don't really want to keep coming back to Boca. My kids are getting a little bit older. I want to be there. I'm up in Boston. And I had a friend who had gone over to Monster, and Monster had said at the time they were going to get into healthcare. But after a year, they said, really nurses and doctors and pharmacists and therapists have no interest in actually going to monster.com and fill out, at the time at least, put their resume in there. So we learned that there was like $600 million being spent annually by hospitals all around the United States using agencies to run ads and magazines and all that stuff. So I went off and I launched, I said, why not? So again, here's that, why not? And so my wife wasn't so thrilled that I quit my job, because again, that's the paycheck stops. So this is that whole kind of, right? But I don't mind my little pup back there. But at the same token, I saw the opportunity. So I launched a media company, and I headed all the development. I offshored some work in those early days. And then I built a team out. We ran out of Beverly, Massachusetts. And I had like 15, 16 people. And we had magazines, we had portals, we had original content writers and all that. And that was a lot of fun. And then this is where the sales side comes in, right? When you own your own company, you got to sell. You can't just wait for people to, you got to be your best salesperson. So I went off and I met with the agencies, and these Bernard Hodis and TNP Worldwide and other big agencies, they loved our product. They loved what we were doing and all that. They said, but they said to me, we don't see you guys in magazines. And I'm like, right, because we're brand new. But we tried it cost me a fortune to run an ad series in 1 month in 7 magazines, and we got absolutely nothing out of it. So my partners and friends, they're looking at me, they're like, what are we going to do? And I was driving home that night, Manning, and I said, you know what? We're not going to just, definition of insanity is repeat the same thing over and over and over and over and just, expect a different outcome. I'm going to go create my own magazines. And so I came in the next day, I had went off and I had registered RN Week and PT Week and OT Week and Physician Week. And I went off and I personally built all the templates and all that. And then I used my offshore team together. And in 3 weeks, we had automated magazine construction, aggregate all content, put it out, run banner ads and all that. And then we promoted our products and our services all through our magazines.
Through there?
Yeah, it was wonderful. I can go on and on, but I'll stop here.
Yeah. Well, you went through a lot. But one of the prevalent things that I'm seeing in all of these stories is that you're thinking very differently, right? And it seems like you're asking why. So even before we continue, one of the questions is like, where do you think that comes from? Because, being able to ask why, being curious, being able to explore new things, overcoming fear, like these are all things that I think subconsciously we know that we should be doing in order to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve, but we don't all do it. So where does that come from you? Like, if you're thinking about this, what makes you like different in that way? What happened? Do you think it was your upbringing? Was it something that you read? Do you think it's something that you're born with, that people are born with? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's something about contributing in some way to, like I said earlier, like in the software days when I was programming for a living, I didn't want to take things just at face value. Like, when you're a kid and the little kids would go, but why? And you're like, well, this is why. And they go, but why? And, and but why? Right. And there's a methodology called the 5 whys. Actually, it's you can look in, and the 5 whys really help you to start like knocking down those dominoes of kind of, now I didn't invent the 5 whys, but if when I learned about the 5 whys later, it's that whole, because, it's not that they are challenging it, but they're trying to inquisitively understand why. And in my case, I wanted the value that, and this was part of, I think, in the Travcore days and all that as well, as I remember when I went to Travcore, they had not had a positive experience with IT. They saw IT people as being, defensive. They were kind of like the elite. We have no idea what they're doing. They talk to us like we're children. We're supposed to, it's like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right.
And I really felt like, we have a need to, so when I remember I inherited a thick folder of things that had been told to people for 2 years that would be coming, but had never come. And I remember I took it upon myself to go, I'm going to take this folder, I'm going to eat it. Over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to program my heart out again. Even though I was leading development and whatnot, I'm going to program my heart out, and I'm going to go and get in front of these people. And I got into it and asked them, well, we got this challenge. I'm like, but why are you asking for this? And like, we got this need. Here's our challenge. And I'm like, but you came up with this. Why did you come up with this? And they're like, well, this is because we thought that this would be the best way. And I started becoming, I think, that we were collaborating. We were symbiotic. We were synergistic. It was value to kind of bring, a greater. It's like the sum of the parts, right? Each part has something to offer, but the product could be better than either one of us ourselves could have come up with. So I think I've always instilled that, and to this very day. I mean, there's many things that have happened after the media company. But I think it's the same kind of thing of why. And then, I do a lot of strategy now. If I come my current times and I look back, I go and I advise CEOs and boards and companies. And I've done that now many, 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 many companies. I work with them and I help them with their strategy. And part of strategy, Manny, is why do you guys do what you do? Why do you decide what you decide on, right? What is it? Why have you guys made a conscious effort to do this or offer that or build that or have this solution?
So it's people that get offensive?
Minds. It's really to open that up. And because I think so very often people might come to a conclusion before they've had a chance to really vet that idea. And for me, the work I do at companies, and I love to see that epiphany moment when people go, I don't know why. And I can't tell you how many times in companies I ask, why are we doing this though, right? It seems counterintuitive. If our goal is this, why is this being done? And they're like, well, it just is. I'm like, why? And it turns out more often than not, you see that somebody who worked for the company years ago had decided that this is something that should be done, but it has no more relevance to the current business. And yet people are no one asks why. They just go, this is what we do. This is how we do it. So I think why is a really interesting question. I also think that, what and how are equally important, right? Because I think what you do and how you do it is really good. Like, this is what we do and this is how we do it. But I think why is purpose driven. Why gives you why are you doing this in the first place? So let me give you an example. When I worked for the medical companies, you think that our goal in life was to place nurses on assignment, win more customers, place more nurses, and keep everybody kind of, the process going. But I remember we used to have these company meetings, and letters would come in, and they would tell stories like, I want to thank your company because, I'll make up a name, Kathleen Johnson. She was holding my mother's hand in the hospital when she was very ill, and we all walked in as a family, and it brought us to tears because we could see how she was connecting to my mom, and my mom was giving her hope in this woman, like, continuity of care, right? We used to call it continuity of care. And she was there, and she gave us comfort as well. And we all left, and guess what? We came back the next morning, and there was Kathleen holding my mom's hand again. And we could see my mom's face lighting up, and we could see her, her healing that was happening. And we think that she got back in the game, and she held on, and she fought through it a lot because of Kathleen. So, thank you so much for what you guys do, and having people like Kathleen in your organization. That's purpose driven, right? That's like,
Right.
We're making a difference. So I mean, it's a long answer to the question, but I wanted to give some context.
No, but I think that it's interesting, what you mentioned, because not everybody is willing to ask why, right? And not only just in, going into a business, but just in general, like, why am I in the situation that I'm in, for example, something so basic, because that leads you to, confronting the problem and then choosing to actually do something about it. And I feel like more often than not, you find people in companies that, and I'm surprised that you haven't mentioned any adversity that came with you asking why, because at least in my experience and other people's experience, the person that comes in asking why is probably going to be the first one to go, because people not only don't want to answer the question, they want to stick to the status quo. That's how they've always done things. I'm sure you've heard that, so that's how they do it. And there's a lot of people that are reluctant to change, because, and at least to some people, that might be what their job is reliant on, right? Because I'm sure that
I'm going to stop you, Manny, because I think it gets back to this.
Yeah.
You're going to be true to yourself. Now, coming back to what I've said, yeah. I'm not, to conform and not trying to be difficult, but to go into a company whose culture is one where, just shut up and do your job. Don't ask why. And if you're satisfied, I want to make a paycheck. This is why I always say is the difference between somebody who goes, I have a job, and the person who says I have a career, right? Because the job says I go in there, I do my time. I don't really care about this job. I'll just do what they ask me to do. And then I will leave, and it's 5:00. I'm off. I'm gonna, go dancing. I'm gonna watch the game. I'm gonna go eat with my family. We're gonna have, we're gonna do the cha-cha, all that awesome stuff. Or you're gonna go in and you're gonna go really yourself. Listen, can I make a contribution to this company? Can I actually? Is this company a company where I'm gonna be valued, my skills, my knowledge, my understanding? And if I ask questions like why, is it gonna be seen as a threat, or is it gonna be seen as like, oh, I'm glad you have that curiosity? I can tell you, Manny, we could talk for hours about adversity that I've had about those, and especially as you come in like I have at the executive level, right? When you come in at the executive level of a company, and you got some really strong egos and pride and power grabs and all that. And one thing I've always said is I don't play any politics. So that's hard for a lot of people. Politics is, we see a lot of going on in politics as we speak in the world of, affairs of elections and all this stuff. But what I'm talking about is internal politics, power, ego, arrogance, stride, dictatorship and all that stuff. And I'm like, so I've walked into many companies where after a few days or weeks, I get a chance to meet with the different managers, the leaders, the executives, and I can't tell how many times like a figurative chessboard is put out. And and the pieces are already on the board played out, and they're like, this is how it is here. This is how it is, and this is how we roll and all that. And I like to go, I'm like, how about we take that chessboard and just do this? And we start here. Because all that has come about is before I came here, and I'm not here to come in as I'm the new guy, but I want to be able to build from here up. and so how we can evolve. If you think about, a lot of work that I do is, like Gordon Ramsay going into a restaurant, right? Where the owners own the restaurant. They're convinced it's not them. They're convinced it's not their food. It's convinced it's everything else, but they can't explain why there's no customers.
Right.
And, you got to work with people. If that's the chessboard, right? That's the chessboard they have all set up. And, you don't want, Ramsey's different than I am, but, you notice he's not like, I'm not buying the food's terrible. Let me tell you, your management style is not working. And so, you got to be able to go into those companies. But I come back to why, Manny. It's a really, really important question to ask. And if you're I don't think you can be true to yourself if you really are asking why, because to your point, if you ask why, you're going to be accountable for whatever comes out of that, right?
Yeah.
And if a why is a good thing, great. If why is not a good thing, then you better be positioned to go through that process with them and undo that. But to me, that's value adding. That's value adding,
Yeah, I think being able to ask why it can be a scary thing, right? Because then, like you said, like that responsibility then falls on you. But it sounds like that question specifically seems to kind of ring true in a lot of the different steps that you've taken to become an entrepreneur. And
Right.
one of the interesting things, not only about you, but a few other people that I have spoken with as well, is that more often than not, they don't just start as an entrepreneur. Like at some point, they worked a regular job.
That's right.
And I think that you're seeing more and more people that are just whatever in school, and they're like, oh, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. Like that's going to be my job. Do you think that it is important for somebody to have some actual work experience before they leap into being an entrepreneur, creating a company, creating a product, etc.? Or do you think that that's something that they can just totally?
Yeah, it's possible.
Is there value there?
I've seen it, but I tell you, the foundation is I did work for Bowden for 5 years. I did work for Cross Country and Travcorp for 11 years. I did run my media company for like 3 years. And then I worked for a healthcare IT company that I started. And for 5-6 years. So these are all companies though. And though I was entrepreneurial in them, in the sense that I was a partner and I started some of these companies, the anchor years of Bowden, the anchor years of Cross Country and Travcorp, they gave me and also I was a CIO for a lot of these companies, and the role of chief information officer is you have to be able to understand the business from everything from start to end, all the functions, all the areas, and understand how that all works. So, in my mind, there's always projects going on. There's portfolios of projects. So what ended up when I started to become entrepreneurial, right? I'm going to go launch my own business. It was very easy after I had that foundation to start to be able to look at the world like this is not some company I'm working for, it's some company I'm building, but it's the same premise. The other thing is that social skills and management skills and leadership skills and what I would call there's IQ and then there's EQ, right? Emotional intelligence. A lot of people can't get over the emotional intelligence side. Actually, it hurts them. They don't, because they don't ask why, or they don't care why. That's another. I don't care why. I just do my job. That's not really a strength. I would rather people ask why than to say I don't care why. So, but I think those are really important foundational blocks that people need before they dive right into entrepreneurship. Now it happens. You hit right place, right time, right opportunity, and all that. But I still think that you see some of those people ultimately struggle because they don't have some of that foundation.
Yeah, and I think also you're gonna probably get a lot more adversity from like the personal side of things, like you mentioned, your wife and your family, when maybe you haven't sought out some of that experience to be able to understand potentially how it means to work. Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, somebody's going to be working for you at some point. So if you don't have the perspective of working for somebody else, then you may not necessarily be able to relate to that person now that you're leading as well.
That's exactly right. Here's the other thing. When you work for a company and you're in a role, and again, as you elevate up and you're doing more things, you're getting exposed to areas just like school that you wouldn't, like accounting and marketing and sales and operations and IT and HR and, all these things that are, that make the pulse of a company go. When you're an entrepreneur, guess what? You're going to do all those things. You're going to do all of that. So if you've never been exposed to any of it, even in a regular corporation and how it's going and rolling, then you're really at a disadvantage of just like diving out there. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And guess what? Entrepreneurs always believe that they have it all figured out very quickly. It's going to all work out just exactly as they planned it. I can tell you, it takes more time, takes more energy, takes more hours, and it takes more money and all the things and oftentimes the road that you start on tends to change depending on where you're talking, because once you get the reality check what the market's asking for, you might shift to adjust,
Right.
To meet that market demand rather than what you originally had sought off to do.
So you went from having this secure job to going and saying, I'm quitting and I'm going to start this new thing. And you did mention that your wife was hesitant, and somebody listening to that, and even me, it's like, why would you take something that is secure? So I know that you have a curiosity and you solve the Rubik's Cube, like you said, but were you ever hesitant? Like, man, I have this secure job, is bringing in good money, I'm able to take care of my family. How do I now go, and I have this desire because I'm bored where I am to do something different, but do I really want to put my family in a place where it's not stable, and my wife is also now concerned? So like, how did you overcome that part of your decision to go from working for a company to now being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, and now everything is responsible. Now you're responsible for everything that happens.
Yeah, it was a big decision. I think that not for the faint of heart, and I think that you have to. I always give the analogy. It's like it all sounds good until the paycheck stops. I walk down the beach and I'm looking at the ocean and the waves crashing and my hair's blowing in the wind. What hair I have left, and oh boy, did I make the right decision here, right? But for me, I think, for my wife, knowing who I am, we had made a decision that you want to add one more dimension. We made a decision early on that I would go off into the crazy world and she stay home and not work. So add that variable to the equation. And so did that, but not meaning I haven't done that once. I did it 4 times now. So I left my cross country job. Then we did the media company. I did I started doing work for a venture capital firm, and I became the CIO for this company called Millennium Pharmacy, doing robotics, automated dispensing, pharmacy dispensing systems. But I walked into his office one day and said, I'm leaving to go launch a new company. And then in 2011, vitalized the healthcare IT company I started with some partners. 2011, January, I walked into that room and I told him I'm leaving. And he's like, what? And then just recently, with this year, I left in my position I've been in, consulting for the company and working for the company for 8.5 years. I'm leaving, and that was just different drivers there. But the point is, it's not an easy choice, and it's there is a risk and element, but life is. I think going back to the discussions I said earlier with the older folks, I would have taken more risk. I would have gone off, and I would have. I have some regrets that I didn't go explore things that I was interested in and wanted to do. And I always wanted the safe thing and hold on to the job. And part of me, I don't think you really get a chance to live if you don't get a chance to actually try to do these things. And so I think it's, you have to be able to be, and I'll be honest, it's very motivating too. The next thing you do, it better work because you got to make this thing happen. So I think that's what it is. I think, but what it's afforded me, and I know we're going to run out of time here to some extent, but being able to have worked, like I said, Borden, those years, a big global manufacturing company, then service-only company where, travel nursing, right? And then launching a media company, and then doing, consulting for venture capital firms, and then working with a pharmacy company that did automated dispensing robot, individual barcoded applications, then launching a healthcare IT company where we helped implement electronic medical records into hospitals and built a whole practice and sold that company to a very, very big company. And then, launching another healthcare company, then getting a call from a friend of mine up in New Hampshire who asked me to help him build out his company, which was not healthcare, but it was a company to help businesses expand internationally and in immigration and compensation and tax and establishment and moving people and assignments and technology. So all of those things, what's really, really fun with all of those things is that many, many, many times I can tell you, and as I've been in these different companies, they're trying to solve a certain problem. I'm like, we solved that before. Or we've done it in a different industry, a different vertical, a different model. This is how we did that. And I'm able to bring us, knowledge and insights and skills and wisdom, if you will, to these businesses that, if I had just been, stayed in the same business, in the same role, in the same thing, I never got exposure to any of that stuff. The other beautiful thing, like I said earlier, is I've gotten exposed to many, many, many cultures, many, many styles of management, many, many different styles of leadership. And I've got to see the best and the worst in that process. But it's made me, I think, a whole person as a result of that. And not to get off this topic, several years back, I went off and I immersed myself. I went half-time for a while at MSI for a while, and I immersed myself out into the world. So I got involved in artificial intelligence companies and blockchain companies and IoT companies and pharmaceutical companies, life science companies, and I'm still actively involved with a portfolio of all of these businesses. Because for me, it's it's lifelong learning. I think I'm gonna I'd stress that, Manny. Lifelong learning, interest, having learning, applying new skills and knowledge. But when I come back to what I said earlier, I really do like to go into companies that are are here and I help them get to here, or they're struggling and they don't know how to, they can't see the forest. And so I, go in there and I call it like CEO brain surgery. I like to go in and actually help these companies. And I don't like to talk about it. I like to execute. Let's actually do it.
Right.
So, so that's part of it. I hope that's a lot I just said, but it gives you a perspective on it.
No, that's good. I wish that I had more time, and I'm going to preface this by saying this is part one, because there are two specific things that I definitely want to have you on again and talk to you about. One is the homeschooling, not the homeschooling, but your wife staying at home, because that's something that my wife and I are heavily considering. So definitely want to get your thoughts. I don't know, maybe potentially have her on if she's willing. And the other is actually talking about building a company and what it takes and what that's going to look like. But I think that this was awesome because we got a good basis. We got kind of your thought process behind all of these things. So I don't know, man, I really appreciate, the time that you've taken aside to be able to talk to me, and hopefully we'll do a part two.
Sounds good. Pleasure's all mine. We'll talk soon, Manny.
Well, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
You got it. Take care.